For 16 long months, Neil Barofsky was the man in charge of policing the $700 billion financial bailout program. It was known as TARP. He has now written a revealing behind-the-scenes look at how he says these funds were mishandled. It is called Bailout, an inside account of how Washington abandoned Main Street while rescuing Wall Street. The book is published by Simon & Schuster, a division of CBS. Neil Barofsky joins us. Neil, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us exactly and precisely what you're saying here in this book about the bailout.
When I got to Washington, Charlie, I saw that Washington had been hijacked by the interests of a small group of very powerful Wall Street banks, that they captured regulators' ideology. And then what happened and what I saw with TARP was that it went from a program that was supposed to help Main Street reinvigorate the economy, restore lending, and help struggling homeowners, turned into a program that really only served the financial elites on Wall Street.
My impression was that TARP was intended to stop a gigantic financial collapse of the system. And if they didn't do that and put some confidence back, the whole system would go tottering over.
Absolutely, and it deserves credit for having done so. But when you think about it, throwing a few $100 billion at the largest banks, along with trillions of dollars of other support, just to preserve what is essentially a broken status quo that benefits really the financial executives of these institutions a little more, wouldn't be that impressive. That's why Congress insisted and Treasury promised more. They promised that the banks would take this money and use it to deploy it into the economy to help bring back economic growth, which hasn't happened because of the way it was mismanaged. They promised, and TARP doesn't get passed, but for the promise to help struggling homeowners and deal with the foreclosure crisis. Democrats in Congress are not going to pass that bill without that promise, and that promise was abandoned. And the reason why is, again, the interests of the banks were always put first. Secretary Geithner himself, when we were confronting him about this back in 2009, gave us a good indication why. He said that the housing program, this thing that was supposed to be a $50 billion program to help 4 million people stay in their homes, was about as much foaming the runway for the banks as anything else.
It is important to note before Nora comes in here that you went to Washington in 2008, after the Obama administration came.
No, before.
Right
I was a Bush appointee, so I crossed 2 administrations. Okay. And I will tell you, Charlie, the capture in Washington, it's not Democrat, it's not Republican, it is across political barriers, and it's a major problem for this country.
I know you're critical how TARP was managed, but you do acknowledge that it helped stabilize the economy. The auto companies are back. Detroit did not go bankrupt. In fact, now Chrysler is thriving. So what's your beef? I mean, you know, there are many economists who say it saved 8 million jobs. And most of it has been recovered. The taxpayer money, it was about $700 billion. About 83% of it has been recovered.
Again, these are good things, and I'm not taking away, and I think I was probably one of the first people outside the Treasury bubble to credit TARP with having done that. But you can't look at a program just at that narrowly. You know, this program was supposed to do a lot more for the American people. And it wasn't an accident. This wasn't happenstance. These were a series of choices. The choices were not to deploy TARP funds to help Main Street and to help homeowners as they were supposed to do and how they promised to do. You know, the housing program was supposed to spend $50 billion. Today, it's around $3 billion. That means that this Treasury Department chose to spend more money to bail out American Express, a credit card company, than it did to deal with a foreclosure crisis that's holding our economy back still today.
But isn't that a reason because most people don't know about what funds are available to help them that are underwater? As you point out, $50 billion, but only $3 billion of it has been spent?
It's partly that, but it's partly because of horrific mismanagement of the program and a real question of what the program goals really were. And as I said before, we had strong indication that it was a lot more about helping the banks stretch out the foreclosure crisis than actually helping people.
Okay, so someone at home who's watching this right now, whose mortgage is underwater, what could have the federal government done that they failed to do?
Oh, we could have had a much broader program that included principal reduction. You have to remember, when you hear officials that sort of complain about the fact that they don't have, that Congress is stopping them, hundreds of billions of TARP dollars were left on the table and not spent to help homeowners.
But are you arguing that they should have gotten more money appropriated for the TARP program and done more, or simply done more with the money they had?
They should have done more with the money they had. And they had $250 billion that they could have spent on homeowners, and they spent $3 billion.
Specifically, what are you saying about Secretary Geithner, who was formerly head of the New York Fed? What is it that you believe he did wrong?
Well, among other things, He presided over, made the policy choices to put the banks before homeowners. He oversaw a policy that saw our largest banks, the too big to fail institutions, get bigger than ever and more powerful, more politically connected.
That's part of Dodd-Frank, is it not, rather than that was passed by the Congress rather than what the Treasury did?
Well, first of all, he helped oversee making the bigger banks even bigger in the beginning of the crisis. Then, as Dodd-Frank was going through, and there were bipartisan efforts to potentially break up the banks, to try to break free their vice-like grip on our economy. So again, so we can have economic recovery. And Tim Geithner and the Treasury Department administration led the crusade to fight that bill, to keep it from happening. And you know, where we are in the economy today is partly the responsibility of Secretary Geithner and the bad policy choices that he has made.
And the foreclosure crisis has not yet been solved, and the housing industry has not yet come back.
Potentially 10 million more people may face foreclosure in this country. These were avoidable problems, and we're paying for it every single day in this stagnant recovery.
Neil Barofsky, thanks.